The Belarusian human rights group Vyasiana has documented some 55,000 cases of repression since 2020. In January 2023, the Parliamentary Assembly of Europe estimated that between 200,000 and 500,000 Belarusians had fled the country. Now, to help us understand the situation in Belarus, I am joined by Anatol Kotau, political scientist, member of the Temporary Council of the Belarusian Democratic Forces Forum. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining me.
Morning.
Now, would you agree with me that as long as Belarus is attached so closely to Russia, nothing will change in Belarus?
Actually, if we look back at the history of the region, we'll see that Belarus now is something like Poland or Czechs or Hungary in mid-60s or 50s of the past century. Then influence of the in that times of the Soviet Union was played a decisive role on the fate of the Eastern European countries. Now this border has moved just a little bit more to east, and unfortunately Belarus is now suffering from Russia, and this is vividly was shown yesterday when Mr. Putin visited Mr. Lukashenko.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think needs to happen in Belarus for this country to be freed from Lukashenko himself?
First of all, there should be an international consensus on that issue that Belarus, Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries should be free from Russia. Because until now, I see some doubts on this topic in the Western countries, in European Union, in US, and it's better not to provoke Russia and not to make Belarus free, because unfortunately Belarusian people themselves in current situation, they will not be able to win the situation.
But wouldn't you agree that it's only a margin of countries that are actually thinking and feeling that everything is fine, Belarus, Russia, Ukraine? So the consensus seems like, well, it's there.
Yeah, the consensus is there, but the second and the most important part of this consensus should be that Belarus should be immediately a part of European security zone, that Belarus should immediately be a part of NATO, because the fate of Baltic states, for example, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, shows us that there is no other way to ensure the security and stability in a particular country which is going out of Russian influence. And the same attitude should be applied to Belarus. It's not only about the will of Belarusian people, it's also about the will of civilized countries to be united, to stay united and to be common.
But it sounds like a closed circle, because as long as Lukashenko is there, I mean, there is no chance for Belarus to join NATO. And the question is, can Lukashenko be overruled by any opposition leaders?
Yes, that's true. But if we look back, for example, in 2020, Belarusian people were very close to overthrow Lukashenko. But everybody saw the Russian troops on our eastern border. And there was no will to support Belarusian people in their fight against Lukashenko, and also to protect this possible victory before Russia. So this should be consensus on both parts, that Belarusian people have a right to choose their president, to choose their legal president, to be free from Lukashenko and from Russia. And the second part is that European Union, US, agree to protect this enlarging freedom, this freedom enlarging to the east. The same situation is now we see in Ukraine. Then it's not sufficient support for Ukrainian troops fighting against Russia. So if we want Belarus, Ukraine, and other post-Soviet countries to be free from Russian influence or Chinese influence, there should be a will to provide a support and to pay price for that.
That's very interesting what you're saying. And I'm glad you mentioned regular people, because we often talk about the regime. However, we don't mention enough people. And I'm sure majority of people in Belarus, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are probably scared to voice their opinions. But what are they feeling? How are they feeling about the regime? What is being said in the at homes, outside, when just private gatherings? What are people feeling about Lukashenko?
You see, nobody likes Lukashenko except Lukashists, and all the possible polls show that his support is just something no more than 20% of the society. And the rest now is keeping silence because it's really dangerous to say something against, or actually to say something. If in 2020, in 2021, it was easy to know what people are really thinking about the situation in Belarus, because there were still some independent media outlets, foreign media outlets there who were eager to speak to people, and people were not generally frightened. In social media, there were plenty of discussions on the situation in Belarus, and now there is a silence. There is a silence because nobody wants to express his or her support to Lukashenko's regime, because nobody supports it actually, but it's dangerous to say something against, because for any reaction in social media, for any public showing of your stance, you will be prosecuted.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that, we had an interview, TVP World interviewed Tsikhanouskaya, and she highlighted the dire situation of political prisoners in Belarus and torture implemented by Lukashenko's regime. What are they going through in these prisons, and who is being captured by the regime? Briefly, please.
Unfortunately, now we have almost 1,500 internationally recognized political prisons in Belarus. It's more than enough for such a small country like, relatively small European country like Belarus. And we know perfectly well that there are thousands of people who are not recognized, who don't want to be recognized as political prisoners, I would say, even more because their relatives otherwise will be prosecuted for just for that reason. And each and every day there are still arrests, there are still new criminal cases started by the regime against the Belarusian people. So now I can say that everybody in Belarus could be political prisoners tomorrow. Unfortunately, this is the situation, and this situation won't change without the real change of the, without shifting, without throwing out the regime from Belarus.
Exactly, and this is exactly where we started at the beginning of the interview. Anatol Kotau, political scientist, was my guest, sir. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.